Hi everyone, welcome to a new cross-border financial series of the Personal Finance Podcast. My name is Anil Kothari and I am a financial coach at MFA. In this series, we explore real conversations around money when life spans more than one country. Because once you move across borders or earn in one place and invest in another, decisions stop being simple. What feels obvious in one country can become complicated in another. And what works well in one system doesn't always translate seamlessly when your connections, capitals, and comfort lie elsewhere. Through this series, the goal is not to recommend products or offer quick solutions. It's to talk about the rules, the nuances, and the blind spots that quietly exist in cross-border investing. The ones most people only discover after something goes wrong. And there's no better place to start than with a concept everyone thinks they understand: diversification. And ask a much more uncomfortable question. Are we actually doing it in a way that protects us when it matters? Diversification is probably the most overused word in investing. Everyone knows it. Everyone agrees with it. Everyone believes they're already doing it. Equity and fixed income, maybe some real estate, maybe a bit of gold or other commodities. A few funds, a few stocks. On paper, it all looks diversified. But here's the real question. Is it actually diversified when it matters? Because diversification is not only about how many things you own. It's about what happens when things go wrong, when markets fall, when interest rates move suddenly, when currencies swing, when geopolitics enters the picture. That's when you find out whether your investments were truly different or just packaged differently. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people do try to diversify. They're not careless. They're not lazy. They add more funds. They add more strategies. Sometimes they even add more finance professionals. And that's when naive diversification quietly creeps in. Two different funds owning the same top stocks, different strategies driven by the same market cycle, multiple finance professionals, each doing their job well, but no one seeing the full picture. So instead of reducing risk, you end up duplicating it. It looks diversified because there's activity, but under the surface, the exposure is overlapping. And you don't notice this in good times because when markets rise, everything feels diversified. The problem only shows up when stress hits. And suddenly, everything moves together. That's when people realize, I thought I was diversified, but I was just busy. Also, diversification doesn't stop at asset allocation. Adding different types of investments in the portfolio does matter. But here's the blind spot. If all of these investments still depend on the same country, the same economic cycle, the same regulator, and the same currency, then the diversification is only partial. It works until it doesn't. This is where geography quietly enters the picture. Geographic diversification is not about chasing returns abroad. It's about different systems behaving differently. And it's not that people don't get diversification. The problem is that most of us stay too comfortable with just one country, the one we know, the one we grew up in. We understand these markets, we have seen how things work here, and looking elsewhere feels unfamiliar. And unfamiliar often feels riskier, even if in reality it might actually balance things better. Research shows that putting your money into two markets, especially ones that don't always move together, changes the risk profile of your portfolio, even if overall returns aren't dramatically different. And this is where one important idea comes in: correlation. And let me explain this. Correlation is simply a measure of how two markets move relative to each other. A number closer to 1 means they move together. Closer to 0 means they behave independently. Historically, over long periods, Indian and US equity markets have shown a correlation of roughly around 0.5. In simple terms, sometimes they move together, sometimes they don't. And that sometimes is where diversification actually works. Correlation isn't fixed. It changes with economic cycles, liquidity, and global events. A real-world example of markets not moving in the same way is unfolding right now. In the US, major benchmarks like the S&P 500 have been hitting all-time highs, powered by strong corporate earnings and continued tech leadership. In contrast, Indian equities have struggled at times this past 1 year, delivering some of the weakest returns among major global markets. And just as importantly, the reverse has happened too. There have been years when Indian markets held up or delivered positive returns while US markets were under pressure. Not because one country was better, but because different economies respond differently to the same global events. And that's exactly why geographic exposure can matter for risk outcomes, not just returns. There's a famous line by Harry Markowitz, the father of modern portfolio theory. Diversification is the only free lunch in investing. Not because it guarantees higher return, but because it reduces the damage when things don't go your way. Now, why this matters today in 2026? We're living in a world where geopolitics matters again. Trade tensions, conflicts, supply chain being redrawn, technology and energy becoming strategic priorities. These forces don't affect every country the same way. Some economies are driven by consumption, some by exports, some by commodities, some by innovation. When uncertainty rises, correlations shift. And that's exactly when geographical diversification starts doing its job, not by boosting returns, but by reducing damage. Because real diversification is about risk reduction first, not return enhancement. Returns are uncertain, risk can be managed. Another angle most people miss is innovation and opportunity. There's also a quieter reason geography matters. Different countries lead in different areas. Some dominate technology platforms, some lead in manufacturing, some in biotech, AI, defense, or clean energy. You can fully believe in India's long-term growth and still recognize this. No single country leads every innovation cycle. Geographic diversification gives exposure to businesses and ideas that may not even exist in your home market yet. And over time, that compounds. And yes, currency plays a role too. Currency is often ignored until it suddenly isn't. Investing across geographies introduces currency exposure. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it hurts. But over long periods, it can smooth portfolio outcomes, reduce concentration risk, add resilience during global stress. Again, not guaranteed upside, but protection against one directional risk. So what's the real takeaway? Diversification isn't about ticking boxes. It's not about the number of funds you own. And it's not just about asset classes. It's about outcomes. Ask yourself this. If something breaks economically, politically, or financially, will everything I own react the same way? If the answer is yes, then diversification may exist on paper, but not in reality. This series is not about telling you what to do. It's about helping you see what to think about. Over the next few episodes, we'll look at different areas where money decisions become less straightforward. Investing, sending money out, and long-term, goal-based planning. The goal is simple: to make you pause, ask better questions, and avoid surprises later. Thank you for tuning in. See you soon in the next episode.